Hi, I'm going to do a video right now where I discuss the three different passages in the Synoptic Gospels that talk about Peter's affirmation of who Jesus was and Jesus's rebuke of Peter. This is fascinating, and I think this will maybe be a jumping off point to talk about some other things. But which was the first gospel? Now, if you open your Bible, Matthew is generally the one that is first. But was it historically the first? Most scholars actually say that Mark was the first. Mark is the shortest. And most scholars think that Mark was written sometime in the 70s after the war with the Romans that destroyed the Second Temple. And then Matthew came later. Matthew came in the 80s. And then Luke in the 90s. Some dated even later than that. Now, many scholars, critical scholars of the New Testament, say that Matthew used Mark and Luke used Matthew and Mark, and that they were all basically riffing off each other, except Mark was the first, so he wasn't necessarily riffing off anyone. But where did Mark get his gospel? There's a lot of possibilities. There's at least a few that we can say. One is he based his gospel off of Paul's teachings and maybe some earlier things, right? Because Paul was in the 50s. He was writing his letters. That's one possibility. Mark could have made the whole thing up himself, right? Especially if there was no historical Jesus, then he could have made up the story. But then, of course, then you have to ask, well, where did Paul, where was Paul basing what he was saying on? The question is whether Jesus was a historical personage or was he a mythical figure. It's unclear from Paul's letters, actually, to what extent Jesus was a historical figure. This has been hotly debated among scholars. It's actually, many scholars accept the historicity of Jesus and the historicity of Paul, and that Paul was talking about an historical personage when he wrote about Jesus. But it also seems as if Paul was talking about a mythical or a Christ that was came through revelation as opposed to things that he knew about Jesus's life, that he was receiving the information about Jesus through revelation, not through secondhand reports. That's one thing. So Mark could have made it up, but he also could have based it on Paul and some of the other earlier reportage. There's some other possibilities, right? That Mark might not have even used Paul, but he might have used some other oral reports or even written. Scholars have posited this idea of Q, that there was a Q source that the synoptic authors used. One thing we know about all of these authors is that they wrote in Greek. Now, could there have been, because we don't have the originals, so could they have written maybe in Hebrew or Aramaic? We don't know. But if they were close to the source, they would have probably not have written in Greek. So anyway, let's just read, forget about everything I just said, except the idea that Mark was first. Okay, so if you accept that Mark was first, let's read it as if. You don't have to accept it, actually. Let's just play a game. Mark, let's say, was the first gospel author. What does he say about this incident? This is in chapter 8. I'm using the King James Bible. This is after Jesus. It's called the leaven of the Pharisees. And Jesus went out and his disciples into the towns of Caesarea Philippi. And by the way, he asked his disciples, saying unto them, Who do men say that I am? And they answered, John the Baptist, but some say Elias, and others one of the prophets. And he saith unto them, But whom say ye that I am? And Peter answereth and saith unto them, Thou art the Christ. And he charged them that they should tell no man of him. So Peter answers, You are the Christ. Peter understood. The other disciples apparently did not quite understand, right? So Peter got it. That's important. And he began, okay, this is a new section now. Jesus is coming death, verse 31 in chapter 8. And he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things, and be rejected of the elders, and of the chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. And he spake that saying openly, and Peter took him and began to rebuke him. So Peter takes him aside, is what it seems to be saying. Peter takes Jesus aside and rebukes Jesus. Oh my God. But when he had turned about and looked on his disciples, he rebuked Peter, saying, Get thee behind me, Satan. For thou savorest not the things that be of God, but the things that be of men. So now it's Jesus' turn to rebuke Peter and say, Get behind me, Satan. Very strong language. Seems like Jesus is upset. He's angry, and he does it right in front of the other disciples. It seemed like Peter rebuked Jesus, apart from the other disciples, but now Jesus is taking him right in front of the other disciples and rebuking him openly in public. And he says, You savor not the things that are of God, but the things that are of men. And when he had, let's just read this ending part in Mark here. Follow me. And when he had called the people unto him with his disciples also, he said unto them, Whoever will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever will save his life shall lose it. But whoever shall lose his life for my sake and the gospel's, the same shall save it. For what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? Whoever therefore shall be ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him also shall the Son of Man be ashamed when he cometh in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. Okay, very strong language. I've mentioned this before, the high bar of discipleship that Jesus has. And that was what Jesus was saying seemed to be in direct connection to what he just said to Peter, that you savor the things of the world. And Jesus is asking his disciples to put no stock in the world. Right? What shall profit you if you gain anything of this world? You gain the entire world, but you lose your soul. So now, Matthew. If Matthew was next, let's see what Matthew says about, what does Matthew say? Oh man, I dog-eared this, but now I can't find it. Shoot. I'll find it. Give me a second. Now keep in mind also this idea, the parable of the sower. That's what I wanted to also bring in Mark. The parable of the sower, which is also in the synoptics. In Mark it says, and he taught them many things by parables. He said unto them in his doctrine, Hearken, behold, there went out a sower to sow. And it came to pass as he sowed, some fell by the wayside, and the fowls of the air came and devoured it up. And some fell on stony ground, right, where it had not much earth, and immediately it sprang up because it had no depth of earth. So stony ground. So remember that in Mark, right? Here is Matthew in chapter 7. One of the things Jesus says is build your house upon the rock, right? He says, therefore, whoever heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man which built his house upon a rock. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. And every one that heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them not, shall be likened unto a foolish man, which built his house upon the sand, etc., right? So build your house upon the rock. Now, let's find in Matthew where Jesus rebukes. Then there's the sower and the seed. So let's read the sower while I'm trying to find that. The sower and the seed. The same day, this is chapter 13, the same day went Jesus out of the house and sat by the seaside, and great multitudes were gathered together unto him, so that he went into a ship and sat, and the whole multitude stood on the shore. And he spake many things unto them in parables, saying, behold, a sower went forth to sow. And when he sowed, some seeds fell by the wayside, and the fowls came and devoured them up. Some fell upon stony places, where they had not much earth, and forthwith they sprung up, because they had no deepness of earth. Okay. Similar to what Mark said, right? The stony ground, fell on the stony ground. There's more to the parable, but I'm just reading that part about, and you'll understand why in a moment here. So then, okay, chapter 16, all right? When Jesus came into the coast of Caesarea Philippi, this is also in Mark, right? He asked his disciples, saying, who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? Now he says he's the Son of Man. He didn't say that in Mark. And they said, some say that thou art John the Baptist, some Elias, it's the same as Mark, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. That was not in Mark. Jeremiah was not in. And he saith unto them, but whom say ye that I am? And Simon Peter answered and said, thou art the Christ. Now he's called Simon Peter. Simon was his original name, his birth name, and Peter was the name that Jesus gave him. Peter was not a name that anyone used up until this point, apparently. Right? This is what I discovered recently, is that Peter was not a name. Now we take Peter as a name. Everyone, Peter's used a lot, but this was a nickname that Jesus gave Simon, and Peter means the rock, right? And Simon Peter answered and said, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered and said unto him, blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah. Now he's calling him Simon Bar-Jonah. I believe this is the first time that he's addressed. Now, Jonah may be important here, that he's the son of Jonah. For flesh and blood have not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. And I say also unto thee, that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Okay, the gates of hell shall not prevail against the church. So I will build my house, my church, upon you, Peter. This is very important, obviously, for what was to come. And the authority of Peter, that Jesus is saying, Peter, you understand me. You get me, man. You get me. So the church is going to be founded upon you, right? And I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Then charged he his disciples that they should tell no man that he was Jesus the Christ. This is also in Mark, right? Don't tell no one. This is the messianic secret in Mark. Don't let other people know. Don't let anyone know that I'm the Christ. Oh, but then, okay, so then, let's see. We got to read the Get Behind Me, Satan. All right, and then he says, From that time forth began Jesus to show unto his disciples how that he must go unto Jerusalem and suffer many things of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed and be raised again the third day. Remember, I mentioned Jonah, right? Jonah spends 3 days in the whale. So maybe there's a connection there with Peter, who's the son of Jonah. Bar Jonah means the son of Jonah. And that Jesus will be raised on the third day. Jonah was a reluctant prophet, remember. Then Peter took him and began to rebuke him, saying, Be it far from thee, Lord, this shall not be unto thee. This is different than what Peter said in Mark. What did he say in Mark? He said, Peter took him and began to rebuke him. Doesn't say what Peter said, but now it says what Peter said to him. Then Peter took him and began to rebuke him, saying, Be it far from thee, Lord, this shall not be unto thee. He's saying, no, that's not going to happen to you. But Jesus turned and said unto Peter, Get thee behind me, Satan. So the same line is there, right? Get behind me, Satan. You are an offense to me, for you savorest not the things that be of God, but those that be of men. You are an offense to me. This is not in Mark. You are an offense to me, Peter. Now he just had said, didn't he just say that I will build my house? I will build my house upon you, Peter. WTF, right? Then said Jesus unto his disciples, If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever will save his life shall lose it, and whoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it. That's very similar to what's in Mark, right? So then he gives a little speech connected to what he said to Peter. Don't put any stock in this world. My death, you're making my death a serious thing. Don't make it a serious thing. It's all about the resurrection. I will be raised up on the third day. That is the important thing, right? All right, so let's read Luke. I'm just reading this. I don't have any agenda here. I do find it interesting that there are differences in these Gospels, right? And I think when we read Luke, we're going to see something interesting here. We have the parable of the sower in Luke. This parable of the sower. So let's read that. If we can read that, let's see that. So, build your house on a firm foundation in chapter 6 of Luke. Okay, so it says, And why call ye me Lord, Lord, and do not the things which I say? Whoever cometh to me and heareth my sayings and doeth them, I will show you to whom he is like. He is like a man which built a house and digged deep and laid the foundation on a rock. And when the flood arose, the stream beat vehemently upon that house and could not shake it, for it was founded upon a rock. But he that heareth and doeth not is like a man that without a foundation built a house upon the earth, against which the stream did beat vehemently, and immediately it fell, and the ruin of the house was great. So there's that, okay? Keep that in mind. Build your house on the rock. That was also, I don't know if that was in Mark, but that was in Matthew. The parable of the sower in Luke. Let's read it. A sower went out to sow his seeds, and he sowed. Some fell by the wayside, and it was trodden down, and the fowls of the air devoured it. And some fell upon a rock. It's not the stony ground here. Some fell upon a rock, and as soon as it was sprung up, it withered away because it lacked moisture. Okay, and then he explains what it means. He says, Now the parable is this: the seed is the word of God. Those by the wayside are they that hear, then cometh the devil and taketh away the word out of their hearts, lest they should believe and be saved. That was also in Mark. The multitude don't understand these things. they will not be saved because they you know, they hear but do not listen. You know, they listen but do not hear. They on the rock are they which when they hear receive the word with joy, and these have no root, which for a while believe, and in time of temptation fall away. That seems to be a direct, talking directly about Peter. Why? Because Peter receives the word from Jesus with joy. He understands who Jesus is, but when he's tempted, he denies Jesus, right? So the house, the seed that falls upon the stone, on the rock, right? The rock. I'm sure many people have talked about this. Scholars have written. I'm sure there's whole books written about this, right? Just bringing this up because I think this is very important. So let's read, "Get behind me, Satan." And it came to pass, as he was alone praying, his disciples were with him, and he asked them, saying, they're not in Caesarea Philippi this time. He was alone praying. Jesus was alone praying. His disciples were with him, and he asked them, saying, "Whom say the people that I am?" They answering said, "John the Baptist, but some say Elias, and others say that one of the old prophets is risen again." Very similar to Mark and Matthew. He said unto them, "But whom say ye that I am?" Peter answering said, "The Christ of God." It's a little different, but it's more or less the same, right? And he straitly charged them and commanded them to tell no man that thing, saying, "The Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected of the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, and be slain and be raised the third day." And he said to them all, "If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever will save his life shall lose it, but whoever will lose his life for my sake, the same shall save it." Now, nothing. That whole thing with Peter is not there. Again, WTF. What happened there? That whole thing with Jesus is missing in Luke. Did that not happen? Luke apparently did not like that, right? If Luke came later, he read what was in Mark and Matthew. If you assume that he had Mark and Matthew, let's assume for the moment, just to play the game, he had Mark and Matthew. So why did he leave that out? But he did have the thing about the rock, right? It would make sense that he would have that thing with Peter rebuking Jesus and Jesus rebuking Peter, because Peter later denies Jesus 3 times, right? Before the cock crows twice, or whatever it is. I hope you see what I'm getting at. We'd have to look at if Jesus says in Luke that he will build his church upon Peter. I'm not sure if he does. But definitely in Luke, we have Peter denying Jesus, right? Anyway, these things, like I said, we could spend days and days and weeks and many books writing about this particular subject and the figure of Peter, because I think it's important in terms of what is the church founded on? You know, is it founded upon Peter? But Peter was not. He did not seem to to completely get it. Or maybe he did. but Jesus says, I will found my church upon you, Simon Peter. You are the rock upon which I will found my house, my church. Now we can ask the question: did Jesus even want a church, given that the end of the world seemed imminent? And what did that mean? And was this later when people wanted to create a church? But then there's the problem of Peter denying Jesus, and isn't that problematic? And maybe I think this is a whole subject that that we could go into deeply, and I hope I got it started there, to see the problem and see how the Gospels do differ, and maybe the little, God is in the details, and maybe the little differences actually make a big difference in terms of what is being said. And anyway, thank you for listening. Hope that made sense, and please feel free to leave a comment. Talk to you later. Happy Easter.